Lisa's thumb glided across the screen of her phone, each swipe feeling more like an obligation than a choice. She was on yet another dating app, the third one in as many weeks, and the excitement that initially accompanied this new venture had long faded. Now, it was just a routine, searching for a glimpse of something real, something genuine, among the countless profiles that felt more like a game than a real connection. She paused on a few profiles here and there, but none held her attention long enough to stop scrolling. Her thumb hovered over the next profile. Greg. He had a handsome face, a clean-cut jawline, and an easy smile that felt almost too perfect. His bio was short, but just enough to hook her. Adventurer. Amateur chef. Always ready to make memories. Let's see where this takes us. Lisa squinted at the screen, half skeptical but intrigued. He sounded like every other man she'd come across in her brief stint in the dating world, charming, confident, but slightly too perfect. But something about his smile, the way his eyes seemed to lock with the camera, made her pause. She hesitated, her thumb twitching slightly as she stared at his photo. It felt silly, but a small flutter of excitement stirred in her chest. It had been so long since she felt that kind of energy. With a resigned sigh, she swiped right. Almost instantly, her phone buzzed. You seem like someone who enjoys adventure. How about a drink sometime? Lisa's heart skipped a beat. It was a simple message, but it was perfect in its timing. She typed a quick response, careful to keep it light and casual. Sounds good. I love a good drink. Where are you thinking? The conversation picked up almost immediately. Greg's quick wit and smooth responses made her laugh, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a spark of hope. Maybe this was it, the connection she had been searching for. His messages flowed effortlessly, each one more engaging than the last. There was a calm ease in his words, like they had known each other far longer than a few minutes on a dating app. He asked about her hobbies, her favorite spots in the city, and, eventually, what she was looking for. Lisa found herself sharing more than she intended, a bit of nervous excitement seeping into her words. She felt comfortable talking to him, more than she had with anyone else in a long time. As their conversation continued, Greg suggested meeting up at a popular bar known for its lively atmosphere. It was a place Lisa had frequented with friends in the past, the music loud and the energy contagious. Let's meet at the taproom tomorrow night, Greg texted. I'll be the guy in the black jacket, waiting for an adventure. Lisa smiled to herself, the prospect of meeting someone she could connect with filling her with both nervous energy and a strange sense of relief. She didn't have to think long before agreeing. Sounds perfect. I'll see you there. The next hour was spent choosing an outfit, each item scrutinized for its potential to impress. Lisa stood in front of her closet, fingers brushing against the soft fabric of a flattering dress. It was black, simple, but elegant. It would do. As she slipped it on and looked at her reflection, her stomach churned with a mix of excitement and doubt. Was she making the right choice? She hadn't dated anyone seriously in a while, and the fear of disappointment gnawed at her. But she had to try. She couldn't keep running from this, not after everything she had been through. Lisa quickly applied a bit of makeup, her fingers trembling slightly as she traced the line of her eyeliner. There was a sense of urgency, like if she didn't go through with it, something would be lost. She exhaled, steadying herself, and grabbed her keys. It was time. The bar was busier than usual when Lisa arrived. The pulsing beats of music filled the air, competing with the hum of laughter and conversation. She stood at the entrance for a moment, her nerves flaring up again. This was it. Her eyes scanned the room for any sign of Greg. After a few seconds, she spotted him, tall, broad-shouldered, and standing near the back, just like he had said. He was looking at his phone, his posture confident but relaxed. When he saw her, he smiled and waved, and something in Lisa's chest tightened. There was a genuine warmth in his expression, and despite the nerves, she felt a small flutter of excitement. She made her way through the crowd, dodging a few people as she approached him. His smile grew wider as she got closer, and Lisa couldn't help but smile back. "Lisa." His voice was warm, almost too smooth, and he stood to greet her, extending a hand. "That's me," she replied, shaking his hand. It was firm but not overpowering. The kind of handshake that put you at ease. They exchanged a casual hug, and for a brief moment, everything felt normal, like two people meeting for the first time with no expectations. "I'm glad you came," Greg said as he pulled back from the hug, his eyes scanning her face with a gleam of approval. "You look amazing." Lisa felt a heat rise in her cheeks but managed to offer a simple thank you. They settled into their seats at the bar, and Greg immediately launched into conversation. His anecdotes flowed smoothly, each one more entertaining than the last. He talked about his recent travels, a hiking trip in the Rockies, and how he once ate a meal prepared by a Michelin-starred chef. Lisa couldn't help but laugh at his stories. He was charming, witty, and seemed genuinely interested in her. It was easy to relax in his company. "So, tell me more about your job," Greg asked, leaning in slightly, his tone curious. "What's the most interesting thing you've worked on?" Lisa paused, surprised by the question. She hadn't expected him to be so engaged. She started talking about a recent project, her words spilling out with more enthusiasm than she'd expected. She loved her work, even though it didn't always feel glamorous. Greg's smile faltered slightly, just for a split second, and he leaned back in his chair. "That sounds fine," he said, his voice shifting, just enough for Lisa to notice. "But why bother with something like that when you could be doing something more fun?" Lisa blinked, thrown off balance by the sudden change in tone. Was that a joke? She laughed nervously, trying to brush it off. "Yeah, I guess. It's just what I do," she said, unsure how to navigate the shift in the conversation. Greg didn't seem to notice her discomfort. Instead, he ordered a round of drinks, and for a moment, Lisa felt her unease settle. Maybe she was just overthinking it. As the night wore on, Lisa began to feel a subtle shift in the air. Greg's stories had slowed, and he seemed to dominate the conversation more, cutting her off mid-sentence or steering her answers toward his own interests. She didn't want to read too much into it, but the change in his demeanor was becoming more noticeable. When her friends arrived and joined them at the bar, the dynamic shifted further. Greg's gaze was sharp, almost possessive, and he kept steering the conversation back to himself, refusing to let anyone else in. His interruptions grew more frequent, and Lisa felt the tension building in the pit of her stomach. One of her friends sent a concerned text, asking if she was okay. Lisa quickly glanced at it, feeling a wave of discomfort wash over her. She was fine. She had to be. This was just how first dates went, right? But something was off. When Greg began asking about her past relationships, probing questions about her ex, Lisa felt the first true crack in the facade. "Why did you break up with him?" Greg asked, his voice tinged with something darker. "Still have feelings for him?" Lisa stiffened, her nerves flaring again. It wasn't like she owed him an explanation, but he was relentless. His questions felt less curious and more like an interrogation. "No," she answered curtly, trying to steer the conversation to safer ground. "It's all in the past." Greg's eyes darkened. "You sure about that? You seem like you're still hung up on him." Lisa blinked, unsure what to say. She could feel her walls going up, the creeping sense of discomfort turning into something else entirely. "Greg," she said, trying to keep her voice even. "I think we should just enjoy the night. It's just a first date, after all." Greg's smile returned, but it was different now, more forced, more controlled. "Right," he said, his voice smooth again. Let's just enjoy the night. But Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that things weren't quite as simple as they seemed. Something was brewing beneath the surface, and she couldn't quite put her finger on it yet. But she would. Soon enough, she would. The night at the bar wore on, and with each passing minute, Lisa felt the weight of the atmosphere shifting. The loud music, the clinking of glasses, and the murmur of conversations were all just background noise to the tight feeling in her chest. Greg's presence was all-consuming now, in a way she hadn't fully registered earlier. At first, he had seemed like an ideal match, charming, charismatic, and full of energy. But now, with each glance, each comment, it felt like something else was lurking beneath the surface. As Lisa glanced at her friends across the room, she felt the urge to step away for a moment, to catch her breath and recalibrate. The weight of Greg's focus had become heavy, almost suffocating. She needed space, just for a minute. But as she shifted in her seat, preparing to stand, Greg's voice cut through the noise. Let's stay here a little longer. We're having fun, aren't we? His words were casual, but there was something in his tone that made Lisa hesitate. His smile, tight and fixed, didn't match the easygoing sentiment he was trying to convey. It was as if he were trying to convince both her and himself that everything was fine. His eyes locked onto hers, and she felt the familiar pang of discomfort ripple through her. Lisa forced a smile, nodding slowly. Sure. I'll just check in with my friends, but then we can stay. But Greg didn't let go of her gaze. His smile remained, but there was a layer of something unspoken beneath it. He was too intent, too focused. Lisa swallowed, her stomach doing an uncomfortable flip, but she brushed the feeling off. Maybe she was overthinking it. After all, they were having a good time. Right. She excused herself with a soft murmur, but as she stood and started to walk toward her friends, she felt it, the firm, unmistakable grip of Greg's hand on her wrist. Hey, wait, he said, his voice tinged with irritation. Lisa froze. Greg, she asked, a slight edge of confusion creeping into her voice. His hand was unyielding as he pulled her back toward him. His eyes were sharp, and his tone was suddenly forceful. I thought we were having a good time. Don't leave me just yet. The grip on her wrist was tight, and Lisa's heart skipped a beat. She met his gaze, but there was no trace of the easy charm from earlier. His smile was gone, replaced by something darker. His expression was a controlled mask, hiding a growing sense of agitation. Lisa's pulse quickened. Her mind raced, but she didn't protest. Instead, she stayed silent, trying to rationalize the situation. It was just a little odd, right? Maybe he just didn't want to be left alone. She was overthinking it. She followed him back to the table, trying to shake off the sudden unease creeping up her spine. Back at the table, she noticed something different in Greg's behavior. His gaze was fixed on her, unblinking, almost too intense. His eyes tracked every movement she made, from the way she picked up her glass to how she turned toward her friends. It was subtle, but the change in his demeanor was undeniable. His gaze, once warm and engaging, now had an edge to it. It was possessive, as though he was claiming her as something to be monitored. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. Greg didn't even acknowledge her friends when they sat down beside her. Instead, he asked her questions that were far too personal, and far too probing. What's your daily routine like? He asked casually, his eyes fixed on her. Lisa blinked, caught off guard by the question. I don't know. I wake up, go to work, sometimes meet up with friends. Nothing too exciting. Greg leaned in slightly, a small smile curling at the edges of his lips. What about after work? Do you go out a lot? Where do you like to hang out? Lisa shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware of how uncomfortable the conversation had become. She laughed awkwardly, but Greg's eyes didn't soften. They remained sharp, focused, and unrelenting. "I guess I just go home and relax," she said, trying to downplay her discomfort. Greg muttered. "I'm just trying to get a sense of your life, Lisa. You know, make sure you're safe." Lisa gave a tight smile, unsure how to respond. She didn't feel unsafe, not exactly. But something about his tone unsettled her. His curiosity was too intense. It was invasive. She wasn't sure if she should be flattered or alarmed. Trying to brush off the odd feeling, Lisa turned to her friends, but Greg's gaze didn't leave her. It followed her every movement as if calculating her every action. The sensation of being observed, monitored, was unsettling, but she didn't know how to voice it without causing a scene. She changed the subject, laughing as she picked up her drink. "So, what about you, Greg? What's your routine like?" But Greg wasn't having it. He steered the conversation right back to her. "So, how late do you plan on staying out tonight?" he asked, his voice low and oddly calculating. Lisa blinked, caught off guard by the question. It seemed harmless enough on the surface, but the way he asked it made her uneasy. She took a breath, trying to shake off the feeling. "I don't know. I'll stay out a little longer. Just enjoying the night." Greg's gaze never wavered. "Are you sure you'll be okay on your own later? I wouldn't want you out too late." Lisa's stomach tightened, a small knot of unease twisting inside her. "Greg, I'm fine. I'm with friends, and I'll be okay." She tried to laugh it off. "It's just a night out." But his eyes, cold and calculating, remained locked on her. There was no warmth in them now. No charm. Lisa could feel the weight of his gaze, like he was measuring her every move. It made her skin crawl. As the night dragged on, the questions became more personal, more invasive. "Who was that guy you were talking to earlier?" Greg asked sharply, his tone demanding an answer. Lisa's mouth went dry. She laughed nervously, trying to downplay the interaction. "Just a guy at the bar. Nothing serious." Greg's eyes narrowed. "Who was he?" "I don't even know his name," Lisa replied, trying to brush him off. But Greg didn't drop it. "Where have you been before this bar?" he pressed, his voice suddenly sharp. Lisa's discomfort deepened. "I went to dinner. With friends. It's not a big deal." But Greg wasn't satisfied. "I've just been wondering," he said slowly, "if you've been to this place before." Lisa's eyes widened. She was starting to feel cornered. "Greg, why are you so interested in where I've been?" His eyes flickered for a moment, before he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm just making sure you're safe, Lisa. You can't blame me for that." Lisa's thoughts began to spiral. Was this really about safety? Or was there something more to his questions? It was starting to feel like control. The air between them had grown thick with tension. Lisa felt a desperate need to break free from it, to create some space between them. She needed to breathe. Hoping to escape the intensity of Greg's presence, Lisa glanced around, looking for something, anything, to take her mind off the situation. Her eyes landed on a friendly-looking man sitting at the bar, and she decided to strike up a casual conversation. At first, it was just light chatter. She kept it simple, laughing at his jokes and listening to his stories. But she could feel Greg watching her, his eyes burning into the back of her head like a heated gaze. She didn't turn to look at him, but the unease was palpable. His presence was heavy, suffocating. And then, like a thunderclap, Greg approached them. "Lisa," he said, his tone sharp, cold. "I thought we agreed you'd stay with me." Lisa turned to face him, irritation creeping into her voice. "Greg, I'm just talking to someone for a minute. It's not a big deal." But Greg wasn't having it. He grabbed her arm, pulling her roughly away from the stranger. I don't think it's a good idea to be talking to random strangers, he said, his voice thick with authority. Lisa's heart raced. She tried to pull away, but Greg's grip was ironclad. Greg, let go of me, she said, her voice shaking with a mixture of panic and anger. This is getting uncomfortable. But Greg didn't let go. Instead, he stepped closer, his face flushed with frustration. You don't know what you're getting yourself into, he hissed, his voice low and dangerous. The moment hung in the air, heavy and volatile. Lisa's stomach dropped, and she couldn't breathe. This wasn't normal. This wasn't how people behaved on a first date. Greg's anger was simmering beneath the surface, and it was only a matter of time before it erupted. Don't ever talk to anyone else again, he spat, his face twisted in fury. You don't get to do that. Lisa's chest tightened. She glanced around, hoping someone would step in, but no one did. Everyone continued drinking, laughing, oblivious to what was happening right in front of them. The realization hit her then, sharp and brutal. Greg wasn't just insecure. He was dangerous. And this night, this date, everything, had been a lie. Lisa's heart pounded in her chest as she turned, desperately trying to inch toward the exit. The weight of Greg's gaze felt suffocating, like an invisible hand was pressing down on her, suffocating her with every step she took away from him. The air in the bar felt suddenly thick, stifling, her lungs were constricted, each breath more labored than the last. The freedom she had once taken for granted now seemed like a distant, unreachable thought. She had to leave. Now. But as she moved toward the door, Greg's hand shot out, grabbing her arm with a force that felt like steel. You're not going anywhere, he growled, his voice laced with barely contained rage. Lisa's pulse surged as she yanked her arm back, but Greg's grip only tightened. Her wrist felt like it was being crushed beneath his fingers, the pain sharp and immediate. She tried again, twisting her body away from him, but it was useless. His strength was far greater than hers. His body blocked her path, his presence a wall of intimidation, and Lisa could feel every muscle in her body tense in panic. Her mind raced, her breath shallow, her heart thundering as the fear began to set in. The exit, that sliver of freedom, was no longer a choice. There was no way out, not without a fight. Greg's voice cut through her thoughts, calm and chilling. He leaned in closer, his breath hot and rancid against her ear. I don't take kindly to being ignored, he whispered, his words dripping with venom. His hand tightened on her arm, the pressure almost unbearable. If you try to leave, there will be consequences. You'll regret it. Lisa's blood ran cold at the threat in his voice, a sense of dread curling in her stomach. This wasn't just possessiveness. It was a power play. And Lisa knew, deep down, that she was losing. Greg wasn't a man who took rejection lightly, and now she was paying the price. The realization hit her like a slap. The walls of the bar felt as though they were closing in around her, the space shrinking with each passing second. The laughter of other patrons became a dull hum in the background as Lisa's world narrowed to just Greg, his grip on her arm, and the overwhelming need to escape. Her heart raced in her chest, and she realized with sickening clarity that there was no easy way out. Every option was blocked, every route to safety closed off by Greg's presence. She could feel him watching her, his gaze never leaving her face. His grip remained firm, his smile gone. Now, his expression was neutral, like the calm before a storm. His control was absolute, and she was trapped in it. Then, just as the panic began to choke her, there was a shift. Greg's phone buzzed in his pocket, and he stepped away for a brief moment to answer it. For a split second, Lisa saw an opportunity. She turned her head, glancing quickly at the door. The alley outside was just a few feet away. She could make it. If she acted fast enough, she could escape. Her legs felt like lead as she took a tentative step forward, but every inch felt like a mile. The door seemed so far away, and her nerves were threatening to undo her. But she couldn't stop now. She had to leave. She reached the door frame, her fingers brushing the handle. The cool metal felt like a lifeline, the only thing between her and freedom. But in that moment, hesitation clawed at her. Doubts flooded her mind, her fear overwhelming the clarity she had only moments before. What if Greg catches up to her? What if things get worse? The seconds dragged on, stretching into what felt like eternity. Her breath came in short bursts, and her hand trembled against the door handle. She hesitated, just for a moment. That moment was all it took. Where do you think you're going? Greg's voice hit her like a hammer, low and dangerous. Lisa's body froze. Her heart skipped a beat, and all of the air left her lungs. She slowly turned, her eyes locking with Greg's. His face was flushed with anger, his eyes wide and wild. His steps were quick, almost predatory, as he stormed toward her. His expression was no longer calm, no longer in control. His anger was unmistakable now, a storm brewing in the dark corners of his mind. I told you, you're not leaving, he shouted, his voice booming across the bar, causing heads to turn. Lisa's stomach twisted in fear as the eyes of the other patrons seemed to bear down on her. Her pulse hammered in her throat. Greg's fury was now fully unleashed. His voice rose, filling the room with an oppressive weight that squeezed the air out of her lungs. You think you can just walk out on me? His tone was savage, more animal than human, and Lisa's skin prickled with the intensity of his anger. You think you can just walk out and forget about me? Lisa stumbled back, the door frame at her back, as Greg closed the distance between them. His breath came in heavy, angry gasps, and his face was twisted in a violent expression she'd never seen before. The man she had laughed with, the man who had charmed her, was gone. In his place stood a stranger, dangerous, threatening, and full of rage. Her legs threatened to give out beneath her as Greg reached out, grabbing her shoulders with terrifying force. He shook her violently, the impact leaving her head spinning. I don't want to hurt you, Lisa, he growled, his voice low and dangerous, but I will if I have to. The words rang through her ears, and fear surged through her veins. She struggled against his grip, her heart racing as panic clawed at her. This wasn't real. This couldn't be happening. But it was. And Greg wasn't letting go. Lisa's body trembled, but she wasn't going to give in. She couldn't. With a surge of adrenaline, she pushed Greg away with all her strength, desperation lending her more force than she ever thought she could summon. For a moment, his grip faltered, just for a split second. That was enough. Lisa twisted out of his hold, her body shaking but fueled by a fierce determination. Let go of me, Greg, she shouted, her voice hoarse with panic. She bolted for the door, her mind screaming at her to run, to escape while she still could. Every step was a struggle, her legs unsteady beneath her, but she wasn't going to stop. Not now. Not ever. Greg's roar of fury shook the walls, and Lisa's heart skipped in terror as she heard the pounding of his footsteps behind her. You think you can leave me? His voice was twisted with rage, a growl that made her blood run cold. You'll never get away from me, Lisa. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she ran, her vision blurring with the tears she couldn't hold back. The alley was just a few feet away, and she pushed herself harder, faster. She had to get away. The door flew open, and the cool night air hit her like a slap. She didn't stop to look back. She didn't stop to think. But Greg's footsteps were close. Too close. She could hear him, smell his fury in the air. Her car was just ahead, and her hands shook as she fumbled with her keys. She couldn't get them into the lock fast enough. Her heart pounded, her head spinning with adrenaline and fear. She had to move. Finally, the door clicked open, and Lisa slid into the car, slamming it shut behind her with a crash. Her hands were trembling as she gripped the steering wheel, and she could hear Greg's voice, louder now, outside the window. "You can't leave me, Lisa. You're mine." He pounded on the window, his fists striking the glass with sickening force. Lisa didn't look at him. She couldn't. She pressed her foot to the gas pedal, and the engine roared to life. The car lurched forward, and the tires screeched against the pavement as she sped away. Greg's voice still echoed in her ears, full of rage and threats. "You'll never get away from me." But she was free. For now. The streets blurred past her as she raced down the dark roads, her mind spinning, her hands gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her body trembled from the adrenaline, but it wasn't enough to shake the terror that gripped her chest. Greg wasn't just angry. He was obsessed. Lisa's heart sank as the magnitude of what had just happened hit her full force. She had escaped, but it didn't feel like an escape. Greg's fury, his obsession, she knew it wasn't over. And she couldn't outrun it. Lisa's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her breath came in short, shallow bursts as her heart continued to pound from the terrifying confrontation with Greg. The darkness outside the car seemed to stretch endlessly, the headlights casting long, sharp beams that sliced through the emptiness, but nothing could cut through the growing weight of her fear. Her thoughts, chaotic and overwhelming, raced through her mind. In a blur. She could still feel Greg's hands on her, the heat of his breath, the rage in his eyes. Every word he had spoken was etched in her memory, each threat sinking deeper into her consciousness. She tried to focus on the road, forcing herself to breathe evenly, but it was impossible to escape the haunting memories that clung to her. The feeling of suffocation lingered, pressing down on her chest with each passing mile. The world outside seemed distant, as though she were floating above it all, disconnected from the reality she'd just narrowly escaped. Lisa's fingers trembled as they reached for her phone, the screen glowing faintly in the dark. She knew she needed help. She had to take action before Greg found her again. Her breath hitched as she dialed the number for the local authorities, her voice shaking as she tried to steady herself. "I need to report something. A man, he's been following me, controlling me. I think he's dangerous." Lisa's words rushed out in a frantic rush. She didn't care if she sounded panicked, she needed to be heard. She needed to know that someone would do something. The dispatcher's voice was calm and reassuring, but it didn't ease the knot in Lisa's stomach. She repeated her location, her hands still shaking as she gripped the phone, and the dispatcher promised that help was on the way. But despite the reassurance, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't safe yet. Not while Greg was still out there, angry and relentless. Her drive home felt like it took forever. The streetlights flashed past in a blur, the silence in the car almost deafening in contrast to the pounding of her heart. When she finally pulled into her driveway, the house in front of her seemed different, unfamiliar, almost alien. The comforting warmth of home was gone, replaced with the cold, stark reality of what had just happened. The lights were on in the house, but nothing felt safe anymore. She turned off the engine but remained seated, her hands still gripping the wheel. The tremors in her fingers wouldn't stop, and her chest felt tight. She stayed there for a few moments, trying to gather her thoughts, trying to convince herself that she was okay. But she wasn't. Not yet. Every creak of the house, every shift of the air, seemed louder than it had before. The house, which once felt like a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. She could still hear Greg's voice in her head, his threats echoing in the silence around her. Lisa had to do something. She couldn't just sit here and wait for him to come after her. She had to take control. With trembling hands, she grabbed her phone again. This time, she wasn't calling the police. She was searching through the messages she'd exchanged with Greg, every text, every photo, every conversation he had manipulated her into having. Her stomach turned as she scrolled through their conversations, reliving the moments when he'd seemed so charming, so perfect. Each message was a reminder of how easily she had been deceived. But Lisa wasn't powerless anymore. She wasn't the same person she had been when Greg first showed up in her life. She was angry. And she was determined to take back the control he had stolen from her. As she searched through the photos Greg had sent, her heart dropped. There were pictures of herself, photos he'd taken without her knowledge, moments she hadn't even realized he was capturing. The reality of what she'd been living through hit her like a slap to the face. But she didn't stop. She saved every last piece of evidence, every text, every image. This was her proof, her weapon. Lisa knew that Greg had been manipulating her, controlling her from the very beginning. But now she had the tools to fight back. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not when she had this evidence. For the first time in a long while, Lisa felt a flicker of hope. She wasn't trapped anymore. She wasn't helpless. She was taking charge. The next morning, she walked into the police station with purpose. The weight of the phone in her hand felt heavy, but in a different way now. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a witness, a survivor, and this phone was her proof. She approached the front desk, and the officer who greeted her could see the determination in her eyes. She knew what she had to do. "I need to report a crime," Lisa said, her voice steady now, no longer shaking. "These are the texts he sent me." She handed over her phone, showing the officer the messages, the photos, the proof of everything Greg had done. The officer listened intently, nodding as Lisa spoke. He took the phone, carefully scrolling through the evidence, and then looked up at her. "We'll take it from here," he said, his voice firm but kind. For the first time in a long time, Lisa felt a sense of relief wash over her. She wasn't alone anymore. The authorities were listening. They were taking her seriously. A few days later, Lisa received the call that would change everything. "We've arrested Greg." Harrison, the detective on the other end of the line, informed her. "He's been charged with harassment, stalking, and manipulation." Lisa's breath caught in her throat, and for a moment, she couldn't speak. The world felt like it was spinning around her, and she had to sit down. She had known that Greg was dangerous, but to hear that he was behind bars, actually behind bars, was a reality she hadn't fully prepared for. The sense of relief that washed over her was almost overwhelming. But there was something else there too. A lingering sadness. For a brief moment, she had trusted Greg. And now, she was forced to acknowledge that the person she thought she had known was nothing more than a lie. Sitting in her living room, Lisa looked out the window at the setting sun. The light bathed the street in a soft glow, and for the first time in weeks, she felt like she could breathe again. She had made it. She had fought back, and she had won. She wasn't just a survivor, she was stronger than she had ever been before. But there was still a part of her that couldn't let go of the fear. As the investigation into Greg unfolded, Lisa learned that he wasn't the only victim. There had been others. Women who had fallen for his charm, just like she had. Women who had trusted him, only to be manipulated and controlled. The realization hit her hard. She wasn't alone in this. But it didn't make the sting of betrayal any easier to bear. Greg had been using fake identities, creating perfect personas to lure women into his web of control. Lisa's stomach churned as she learned more about the extent of Greg's deception. But despite the horror of it all, she felt a strange sense of closure. He couldn't hurt her anymore. And he wouldn't be able to hurt anyone else. She couldn't shake the lingering unease, though. Even now, as Greg sat behind bars, Lisa found herself looking at the profiles of people on dating apps with a new sense of skepticism. How many others were out there hiding behind facades, pretending to be something they weren't? But despite that unease, Lisa had learned something important. She had learned to trust herself again. She had learned that no one could take away her strength. The journey to healing wasn't over. But Lisa was stronger now. And she was ready to face whatever came next.